Hi. As most people who are watching this or listening to this probably know at this point, my name's Dylan from Hockey Unfiltered, the podcast. Ken and I wanted to discuss an issue that took place on Twitter recently with an article that was written. The main point to this mini episode is that obviously, Twitter, there's a lot of nonsense, but there were some valid concerns, and we wanted to let people know that those valid concerns are heard and we want to address them. And so I reached out to some people within my community, within my orbit, who the majority were people of color, and I reached out for their concerns and their questions. And so these questions that I'm going to be talking to Ken about, Ken has not heard them in advance. This is all off the cuff, but I think that, and Ken thinks that it's important to address these issues so that they're not allowed to fester and they're not allowed to cause any concerns moving forward. So that being said, Ken, it's been a long couple of days for you.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a learning process and it's a learning experience, and we move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A concern that was brought up to me that I thought was really cogent by a friend of mine was part of the reason why she thinks that people jumped over this was because, and she is of color, and she says there's a concern that momentum will be lost. And there's a concern that with a social issue like this, it's in the forefront, change is being made at this point in time. But there's this concern amongst people of color that this has happened before and change was made and things were moved forward and then stagnated for years and years and years after that. Can you speak to that?
Well, that's an issue that's bigger than all of us, I think. And I mean, I can see that concern. And I didn't obviously hadn't thought of that because I'm not. It's not something that I'm really familiar with. Mm-hmm. However, I would say to that is, I mean, the whole issue came up because of what may or may not be a misunderstanding. Right. And I think that's the crux of the matter here. I had a lot of people say to me, it doesn't matter what his intent was. Well, I respectfully disagree. It does matter what his intent was. Yeah. In my opinion. Yeah. And that matters. Yeah. So to me, the one thing that I think needs to be pointed out here is that in this whole thing, this was an older white man coming to the defense of another white man, right? Mm-hmm. And pointing out that he hasn't received due process.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of cases the other way where people of color have not received due process. Yeah. In a lot of their dealings, whether it's in the court of law or outside the court of law, mm-hmm. they haven't received due process. Mm-hmm. And that's absolutely true. And that's absolutely something that needs to be pointed out that I didn't point out. Yeah. So to me, that's a really important thing that needs to be brought to the light. Yeah.
I completely agree. I was going to get actually to that point, so I'm glad you brought that up. The next thing of the three things here is a large issue that a lot of people privately took up, and on Twitter was a prominent one, was the issue of equivalency,
right?
And the ability to say this is as bad as that,
right?
And I think that to your point of, and I mean, I'm not going to call somebody else a white man without looking at myself,
right?
But to your point of that, there was concern of you saying that this is as bad as that,
right?
When there's not, you've not experienced racial intolerance as I have not either.
Right.
And so did you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah. I think if there's anything I could sort of, if there was any way I could put the genie back in the bottle, that might be it right there.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure that people had as much a problem with the content of what I wrote. Mm-hmm. I think it was the tweet. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, and I think this is really, really unfortunate, is that the tweet became the story and that people didn't even saw that and didn't even bother to go to look at what I had written.
Yeah.
Because the first two paragraphs in that blog are, if this guy is guilty of what he's being accused of, then he deserves he deserves every bit of punishment that he receives.
Yes.
And there's no place for it. And I even feel like it's trite to say there's no place for it. Like, of course there's no place for it.
Right.
That's a massive understatement.
Should be a given.
Right. Yeah. Right. So I will acknowledge that was an unfortunate choice of words.
Yeah.
I do think that someone being wrongly accused of something, or not wrongly accused, but being accused of something that they didn't necessarily do, I think that's really serious.
Yeah.
I think that's really egregious.
Yeah.
And I think it's really bad.
Yeah.
Is it as bad as racism? No.
Yeah.
But it's bad.
Yeah.
I think it's bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will gladly acknowledge that was probably not the best choice of words.
Yeah. A few commenters mentioned, and I do think that this might be misinterpretation, or I know I'd be fairly sure that this is misinterpretation, but a few commenters did mention that the way that they read the article suggested that you were not only putting the onus on Jordan Subban to prove the racism, right? Because he interpreted a gesture a certain way, but also suggested that you were suggesting that Jane Doe in the Patrick Kane incident was also potentially not being entirely forthcoming.
It was an equivalency. Maybe it wasn't a good one. I think a better one was the Morgan Riley one.
Right.
Where it was on tape, where it sounded like he called the referee a homophobic slur.
Yeah.
And if you were to just go by the video, which was what a lot of people were saying, it's right on video. It's right there. The proof is there. What are you looking at? Mm-hmm. If we had done that in the Morgan Riley case, he would have been guilty of
ostracized.
of uttering a homophobic slur to a referee when in fact that wasn't at all what he said.
Yeah.
I think he said something about rag it for the puck, like to rag the puck.
Yeah, yeah.
And once everybody pulled on that thread, they unspooled what happened, and Morgan Riley was exonerated. Now, I'm not saying that that's what is going to happen or should happen in this case. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is something happened. A person perceived it one way. Mm-hmm. The alleged perpetrator perceived it in another way. So let's find out what the truth is.
Yeah. Second to last question.
Okay.
Was an effort made to reach out to Jordan Subban when writing this article, and if not, then why?
It was not. I did not. I didn't reach out to Jacob Panetta either.
Right.
I didn't reach out to either of them.
Yeah.
Because I kind of thought that it was, it was right in the middle of the storm, and I just didn't think that
they wanted to talk.
That they were willing to talk.
Yeah.
Because to me, and also to me, I don't think it's germane what those guys have to say. Either of them. Because to me, it was an issue of fairness. It wasn't to me, it wasn't about Jordan Subban. I fully believe that Jordan Subban interpreted it as something as he did.
Yeah.
And there's no fault there. I mean, because of the fact that he's probably been used to people saying and doing things to him that have been of that nature in the past.
Yeah.
So his first instinct in a game, in a hockey game where there's thousands of people around in a rink and, you know, heat of the moment and all that stuff, you know, it was understandable that he might interpret it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was what was done. Okay, if he did, or, you know, if it was a misinterpretation or not, well, let's figure that out. But it wasn't, to me, I guess the reason why I didn't reach out to either Jordan Subban or Jacob Panetta is because I thought it was bigger than them, and I didn't think it was about them at that point, like necessarily about specifically them. It was about the issue. I will say this much, that I did reach out to the Jacksonville Icemen, and I wanted to talk to their CEO, Andy Kaufman, because Andy Kaufman, the CEO of that team, said Sunday morning, I believe it was, it happened Saturday night. Sunday morning, they came out, the team came out with a news release that said, you know, we're appalled by what happened, blah, blah, blah. And I don't remember the exact wording, but it said something like, we will not be commenting or making any decisions until after the investigation.
Right.
They said that. And then less than 3 hours later, they pivoted and they let go of Jacob Panetta. And they said, and they even said, even though the league is investigating this incident, we have released the player. Right. So I reached out to say, well, what changed? What changed?
Yeah.
What changed? You know, did you find something out? Did you learn something that made it an ironclad case that you're not telling us or whatever? But I did reach out to them and I never heard back from them.
Yeah.
So.
Final question before we end off this mini episode. What would you say that in all this you learned or took away from this situation?
That words matter, first of all.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was just reading something and it was like, it's just things you should do before you put something on social media. And one of them was, you know, how am I wording this? Am I wording this in a way that is, fair and reasonable to everyone? And am I prepared for the backlash? The first part, it could have been worded better.
Yeah.
The second part, I was prepared for backlash. I know what Twitter's like.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for it to be as vicious as it was. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, and I'm going to say this with 100% conviction. People who accused me of being a racist, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're wrong. And you're free to say whatever you want.
Yeah.
And you can look at this and turn around and call me a racist again if you want.
Yeah.
But you're wrong. You're 100% wrong.
So with that, before we get out of here, I actually have written as my kind of closing thing is to say that if I for 1 second thought that Ken was in any way, shape, or form a racist, I wouldn't be here doing this. I just wouldn't. And for my personal 2 cents on this, I think that if you don't have due process, you're cheapening everything. And due process is what allows people to end. It's what allows the debate to end. Instead of people saying this could be racist or this couldn't be racist, it allows the debate to end, because if it was racist, and maybe it is, and probably even to that extent, but then you simply have something concrete to point at and say, this is what it was, and I have that on my side, and therefore the debate can simply end. And that is the true power of due process. So thank you for listening to this. Thank you for being with us. This is not an easy episode, but we appreciate you and all the folks that have taken the time to check this out. Take care.